Welcome to Power Hour, where the editors of Power Sports Business interview the movers and shakers of the power sports industry. Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan with PSB, and today we've got Colin Godby on our Power Hour podcast. And Colin is the CEO of Dust Moto, which is a new motocross motorcycle brand out of Bend, Oregon. And we're gonna kind of get Colin's take on everything from how the motorcycle industry is doing to tell us more about also Dust Moto and their plans. So Colin, welcome. And if you could give us a little background, your background. I know you've been at some other places. You want to tell us a little bit about your history and how you got here? That'd be great.
Yeah, Brendan, thanks for having me. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I started my career down in Southern California working on vehicle first article prototypes and technology demonstrators with a company called Works. Actually, relatively early in the electrification scene, we worked on some military vehicles, the precursors to the JLTV programs, doing some kind of hybrid electric armored kind of tactical vehicles. I worked on some Baja race cars as Rod Millen was sort of
I've seen those, like the little dune buggy type. Were they electric powered or were they gas powered?
So we tinkered a little bit with various kind of powertrains, but a lot of the Baja stuff was gas based.
Okay.
And then a bit of theme park ride and stuff like that. And that's kind of really hit my, I think, passion as a kid working on things that go. A lot of unique programs. And in that time, I also had a chance to work on personal kind of downhill mountain bike development projects. So I got my teeth cut on the two-wheel side of things as well. But then I've gone through my career working in various consumer product companies, from Skull Candy headphones to Sphero robot toys. Wow. And then most recently, before Dust, I was the chief product officer at a company called UBCO, which is a New Zealand-based utility electric motorcycle, sort of like the Honda Trail 90 electric with two-wheel drive.
Yeah.
And so, coming out of
also has tentacles in Oregon as well, right? Like they have like a U.S. distributorship or something there?
That's right. Yeah, the distribution office was in Eugene, and it's one of the ways I kind of became connected to the brand, as I was based out of Seattle at the time. Joined as sort of a fully remote chief product officer, and had worked to build up the team based in New Zealand during COVID, but also eventually built a satellite product development office here in Bend. And that's kind of why Dust has ended up in Bend. And, my two other co-founders, Jarrett and Neil, also worked with me at UBCO. And I think the understanding of the industry and experience in the supply chain and I think the evolution of electric got us thinking about what could be next, and sort of was the genesis for what we're doing at Dust, for sure.
Yeah. So now explain a little bit about the bikes you have sitting behind you, which are those are your first brand, right? What is it, the Model 1, or is that those prototypes of a Model 1?
That's right. Yeah. So for Dust, our product we're launching with is called the Model 1. And one of the unique things about us is we're sharing our development process kind of in high transparency. We call it build in public. We can maybe talk a little bit more about why we're doing that and that connectivity with the customer and our audience. But so we're calling it alpha phase prototypes, our first phase of prototypes. We're working on our next design phase, which will be the beta phase. And later this year, we'll roll into pre-production. But we started working on the detailed design of these back in October, worked really hard and focused to have the design locked by December, started building the bikes and completed them sort of end of January. And now these two behind me are sort of bikes 2 and 3. The first one has been disassembled and is currently in a test lab, having some stiffness and stress testing done in the lab. And we've been using these alpha phase proof of concept prototypes essentially to make sure that the thesis behind what we're doing holds true. So can we make an extremely fun bike that fits a wide variety of riders, where the power to weight ratio is very compelling? It's more approachable than a full size kind of 250 or 450 class bike, but at the same time still gives you those sensations and in terms of power and jumpability and all those sorts of things that people are looking for. So so far it's been going really well. Yeah.
And so with these, I assume with electric, you've got a lot more options as far as tunability, right? That probably way more so than easier than what you can do on a ICE engine, on a gas powered engine, because you don't have to change camshafts and valves and all those kind of things. It's more of a software deal, right? I mean,
That's right.
to change some of the dynamics or some of the characteristics of the power.
That's right. Yeah, similar to, in kind of the automotive motorsport side of things where you can drop like a new ECU tune. The nice thing about electric is like that's all integrated into the base platform. Like your motor control, sort of the digital controls are really easily adjusted. And so that gives us the opportunity, and it's similar to RC cars, honestly. Like it's probably
Oh
the
yeah,
touch
yeah.
point that a lot of people have experiences with is, you get a brand new RC car, you can turn the throttle down to 50% mode or 25% mode to learn it. If you got a little kid that you buy a car for,
Oh
you don't want
right.
them to crash it straight in the curb, right? So
Yeah. Or
so
like
on
me,
the
I'll crash
motorcycles,
anything.
yeah. And so on these it's the same concept where basically currently in the prototypes we have three modes. Theoretically it's infinitely adjustable, but we have three modes. On those three modes, we're able to control the throttle map, so how aggressive the actual throttle tip in is. We can control the amount of torque that's available. We can control the amount of power that's available, and we can control the top speed.
Now, can you
So
control torque at throttle position, like throttle tip in torque as
that's right.
mid range torque, and then top range power? Like you
You
can
you
maybe.
can do Yes, you can do all of that stuff. And so like the example we give is like mode 1 on this current prototype bike is like learner mode. It doesn't have an aggressive kind of tip in high torque availability. So it's really hard to whiskey throttle. Like you can't
Oh
really
yeah.
get into that, oscillation. So a learner, even if they surprise themselves, it's not such a hard hit that it gets you back on the bike and getting more throttle. But in mode 3, you can make it more aggressive to be able to lift the front end over logs if you're doing harder enduro stuff, or you can make it smoother if you're out on the track and you want to be able to kind of roll into the throttle coming out of a loose turn or something. So
Yeah.
it's and that's really nice because it allows you to have one bike that you can teach a family member on, and at the same time you jump on, click a couple mode switches, and now you're kind of full power and able to send some jumps and stuff like that.
And there's no gearbox or clutch or anything, right? So you're just kind of it's all one, kind of
Yeah.
twist and go.
Yeah. So that, it is possible to build electric bikes. Some brands have been doing that, especially in the trials scene, where having a clutch is still, I think, a key
Yeah.
portion of the experience. But we're, at least for this first model, we're really going for approachable performance, and part of that is just the learning curve of having 5 different control methods. Clutch, brake, throttle, foot brake, foot shifter, like 5 different control methods all at once is a lot for anyone learning
Yeah.
or trying to get much better, right? But the other piece is actually for advanced riders, not having to worry about the gear shift and foot brake means you can focus better on better body position, better foot peg weighting. You get more modulation out of the handbrakes, and it ultimately most people end up being faster in a lot of situations with
Oh,
kind of
I
the
could
simplified
totally see that.
control scheme. Yeah,
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 yeah, because you're taking away some of the distraction or something that someone might be struggling with, and you're just focusing on your line and getting power
that's
down.
right.
You're not like, oh, I got a downshift here, I got a clutch here,
That's right.
You
That's
see
right.
that in a lot in, like racing now, like car racing. They've all gone to like those paddle shifts and stuff. I came, where you had to go through an H pattern box and double clutch
Yeah,
downshift. It's like too much to think about.
yeah.
And
Well,
so,
and it's
yeah,
one
I
of the
think,
reasons. It's one of the reasons why 4 strokes, I think, became sort of the weapon of choice for a lot of people. Is like you can, if they're more
that
forgiving, to be.
power
You can.
band was a
That's
lot
right.
wider,
You can be in the wrong gear and still get around the track well, or even just lug around 1 or 2 gears rather than having to use the whole gearbox. So it's kind of a
Yeah,
similar idea, just extended. Now you only have a single speed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, explain a little bit about now you're starting off with this like crowdfund thing, but you still want to have dealers involved as part of your plan. But explain a
Yeah.
little bit some of your business model of what you're doing with Dust Moto.
Yeah, so it's probably helpful on the business side of things to describe some of the boundary conditions, or like, sort of the building blocks of what we're
Yeah.
doing. So I think some things that we can all roughly agree on is that it's hard to start a business like a motorcycle company. The amount of investment and time involved in developing the product, in addition to the marketing and the sales networks and manufacturing, all that stuff is a heavy lift, right? The other piece is the market is not so, I think, excited about investing in electric, vehicle businesses right now. Like there's kind
Yeah,
of
right now, yeah.
the hangover from the 2021, early 2022, when everything was gangbusters, has changed, right?
Hmm.
So as we were getting rolling, we acknowledged it was going to be tough for us to, raise a bunch of outside capital to start a capital intensive business like a motorcycle company. And it also wasn't going to be possible for us to completely, bankroll this personally because of the magnitude. And so we said, how can we create a model where we can get rolling, show meaningful traction, and really prove to potential investors and our customers that we're a legit team, that we're headed in the right direction, without kind of the extreme risk that people are kind
Right.
of perceiving right now. So crowdfunding, we've always been interested in the idea because it aligns incentives, right? Like you bring customers on board that are really want this product and are willing to make a little bit of a bet on you, and we have to deliver to show that we're who we claim we are. We opened up 50 slots the beginning of August last year, called Founders 50. We ended up filling that in 24 hours.
Oh,
and
wow.
and the program was really unique in that it's a monthly subscription. So a lot of power sports is financed, right? And we
Yeah.
knew that asking people to pay 100% upfront for an expensive product like a motorcycle and then having to wait for it would have been tough. We said, well, what if it was sort of like financing it? It's a monthly subscription, and at the same time we can have monthly meetings where we bring people into the development behind the scenes. We actually have face to face, over video call, like, this is what we're working on, what do you guys think? Like, hey, are we missing anything?
Right.
And so
So they're
that
kind of
gives.
your test rider. They're kind of like your testing, your focus group, your
Yep.
investors, early adopters, everything kind of
That's right. Yeah, we
rolled
get to
into
see
it.
ask who they are, like, why did you join us? What are you currently riding? So, some of them don't ride at all, but they've always wanted to. Some of them ride dirt bikes, and this will be their first electric bike. Some of them are into Surons and other sort of electric bikes already, and they want a better one, right?
Yeah.
So it's been really great learnings for us, but it also aligns every month. We need to make sure that we're making great progress to earn that backing, right? But the other thing that does, and we've leaned into, building an American dirt bike brand. It's been a while since, the US has had a dirt bike brand to
Right.
get behind, right? And a lot of this, couple generations of riders have been abstracted out of the development story. These brands are in Japan or in Europe, and a lot of cool work happens, but it's behind closed doors outside of the US, right?
And then they just sort of go, "Hey, here's the machine, and let's,
That's right.
now you got to buy it," and
That's
they're
right.
not. Yeah. Yeah.
So we wanted to, the crowdfunding, but also the way we're marketing and sharing the development journey with these prototype bikes being shown so early in the process is like, this is an interesting story that we're building with our customers, with our fans. And a lot of people that are like me grew up just being passionate about things that go and want
Yeah.
to, like, design a race car, want to design a motorcycle. Like, this is kind of an outlet, and can we actually deliver value to our people that are following us and our backers just by helping, share and shape this story with them involved. So that kind of fed us through, those crowdfund backers showed the traction we needed to raise a little bit of angel investment, design and build these prototypes, get those under test riders, and then show through content on our Instagram and other social media posts, our newsletters, what we're trying to do.
I was going to show this one, which was kind of, sorry, I just wanted to show this. I thought this was kind of cool to,
Yeah. Yeah, and we've gotten a variety. We've gotten a variety of riders on the bike. So, April, based at there in Boise, she came to visit. She's, roughly 5'4", and then we've gotten some of the local Pacific Northwest kind of pros that are 6'2", 6'3", and it's all part of, showing how to develop a product, get field testing done, get that feedback. And a lot of times this stuff is like completely behind closed doors. Like this stage of development would never be shown from a big company because in their eyes it's too much risk, right? There's a conservative angle. They don't want to give away too much. But for us, it actually gives us a head start in building the brand and establishing us as a team and our product and where it's positioned. So yeah, crowdfunding has been a key part of it, and it helps us then build towards to show that demand, right? Like
Yeah,
with the first 100 and Founders 50, we'll have filled
kind of
150 slots, you know?
like a proof of concept in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
which you already have the concept and everything, but it's really kind of that refining. And then you've got people that are, maybe they're almost like ambassadors then too,
that's
that are
right.
those early adopters. So,
Absolutely. They're kind of
um,
evangelists. They want to see us be as successful as possible. They're stoked to share it with their friends. But what's interesting, as you mentioned about dealers, is the dealer network when it comes to power sports is inextricable from the success of these OEMs. And we think that's the same for us. By doing the crowdfunding early, it's a really strong proof that there's demand, that people want this specific product because they're
yeah,
committed with their hard-earned cash. It also builds sort of, like you said, the network effect, and the marketing allows us to show that there's bigger reach. And what we're doing in this next phase is we're starting to have conversations with potential dealers, and our intent is to lock down, I would say, a tight but highly capable network of launch dealers that go along with selling direct. And we've learned a lot, working with Ubco. We had kind of an omni-channel approach, dealers, distributors, as well as direct.
right.
We've seen other brands navigate this. It's not.
I've seen a lot of e-bike type brands that have done exactly that. Like they have a kind of a portion of direct sales and another portion of dealer network, dealer sales.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And it's not necessarily easy to navigate. It's possible, but we want to do this a little differently, where we're able to bring this core group of dealers on board early enough that we can shape the programs and the way of working early. So we can say like, hey, we want to make sure that a direct sale doesn't feel like we're stealing from their, funnel of potential customers. And if there's a sale through the dealer, it's also connected into our kind of customer experience as well, so we can benefit both sides if we shape it together. So that's the overall intent. Is, yeah, we'll sell direct. It makes sense in terms of keeping some margin for us as a business to be able to develop
yeah.
a great product at a certain price point. But then we also want to bring in the dealer network because of the value that they bring around
And
test
you're
rides
not
and
going to
service.
undercut the dealer network by selling online in any way. You're going to be able to
Yeah,
protect that kind of. So, yeah, I think that, and that's what dealers want to know is I think, hey, can I make, some margin on this? Can I make anything on this? And is there demand for it? And if
that's
you
right.
guys prove all those things, I think, it's going to be a winner for a lot of dealers for sure.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah, and there's a lot of other bike brands that dealers are starting to pick up, and the thing that we hope gets the channel excited is like, this is a unique American brand with a strong brand positioning. We're developing this to attract core rider segments, but we're also looking to bring new riders in. We know that the industry has struggled with that the last couple of decades, is sort of the aging population of motorcycle
right.
riders, and how do we keep bringing fresh blood in? And I think companies like Suron have shown like there's a ton of young riders looking to
Oh,
get on
absolutely.
these electric bikes, but they don't really have anywhere to go. There's no stepping stone or bridge into the main sport, the main industry, and we can
Yeah.
maybe help be that bridge into power sports,
And I think one of the
formally.
things you pointed out earlier too, before we were recording, was just that a lot of the dirt bike brands that are, out there now, the bikes out there are more aggressive looking. They're more built for race, not
Mhm.
necessarily the trail. There's not as many of the trail type, single track machines. And this is a great looking bike, by the way. I think, as far as like, I've always thought those Chiron type, styling, and I won't say it's just Chiron. There's others that
Mhm.
have that, or Cake or whatever. They were kind of strange looking a little bit,
Mhm.
but they have their place, But
Yeah.
these look like proper dirt bikes.
Yeah. That
Um,
was a key element for us in starting Dust. Was the design has to resonate. Like, one of our hypotheses or beliefs about why electric has struggled on some degree. There's other bikes like the Alta and the Starks that really kind of embraced a full moto appearance, but they're kind of in a different position in terms of where they're, the product offering at a, kind of 450 class experience. But a lot of the other bikes, they approach it with a little, is it a little more mountain bike, or is it a little more toy, or is it a little bit more like design oriented? And like for us, we felt like that positioning wasn't helping any of them succeed in the core market. And so we said, we got to build a bike that resonates for the core marketplace. The moto riders that have gas bikes in the garage already, if the electric bike doesn't look the part, doesn't look like you can rip on it, doesn't look like you walk away and you give it a second look like, yeah, that's sick, like, then we failed. But then on the same side of the coin, like, we are trying to build a brand and a product that attracts new people into the sport that have always been wanting to ride, or, already in mountain bike, they get like the kind of more sophisticated design language that is exists in mountain bike. Can we build something that attracts them, where they're like, dude, this thing is sick. Like
a step up from the mountain bike for sure,
Yeah. Where they might think, oh yeah, most motos are just a little too aggro, And like, now this is a little bit more understated, a little more sophisticated. It still looks fast, but at the same time, it's a little cleaner, So we're working to find that line, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback so far.
And so, and a lot of the componentry looks like, you've got some motocross componentry, brakes, tires, suspension type of things that look very similar to your gas powered motocross bikes. Yeah. But then you've got other, the motor, which I guess is like, there's a lot of various levels of motors out there of what, there's good ones. And, and we saw at AIM Expo some bad motors because one of them caught fire during the show, which wasn't good.
No. Yeah, that's not good.
And
it's an interesting space. Like, it's another one of those key kind of value points that we're working towards. Is a lot of brands on the lightweight side of the scale are almost using like these mountain bike crossover components, and the idea is interesting. Can you make a much lighter bike, like not 230 pounds, but 130 pounds,
right?
With a motor that's fun. And it turns out, yes, that weight is super interesting. Like, with enough power, it starts to feel almost more like a BMX bike, hitting jumps and stuff, but they fail. And so there's this crossover point where enough power, you start to be able to outride the chassis, outride the componentry.
You're putting way too much stress on those components.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we've anchored more on like, okay, we actually have to have true moto fitment for most of this stuff. So a lot of our axles and bearings are coming straight out of existing bike spec, the diameters and the needle bearings and all that stuff, the head to, the races and all that stuff. That's like moto fitment, bars, wheels, brakes. It's all moto fitment. That being said, we are kind of navigating like, okay, and looking at the stresses and the weights, will like an 85 cc fitment 43 millimeter fork work here? And and sometimes those 43 millimeter forks are actually used on some of the big adventure bikes, like the new F800 from BMW. They're not full 48 millimeter forks, they're a little smaller, right? Then what do we need to go big on? Okay, there's really high loads coming through chain and stuff like that. Because of the torque, we got to run a 520 chain, so we're kind of navigating and creating this unique recipe, I would say, where a lot of it you can't pull directly out of a gas bike fitment because you're trying to find this line. And then the final piece you hit on was electric is such a new, like, the powertrain is relatively new. Like our precursor brands like Alta and Zero, they had to do a lot of like early research and investment and invention essentially to get this level of power. But within that dynamic change, it's caused a lot of new suppliers to enter, cutting corners. It's not really well regulated. And so you really have to make sure you understand what goes into battery, controller, and motor development to deliver something that's high performance and reliable. I think a lot of brands are not fully doing that. The gas industry, they've been doing it for decades, right? And so they're all relatively.
It's been about 100 years worth of trying to, regulate and perfect that.
That's
so
right.
We haven't had that. We're just such early on in this, and it's come leaps and bounds in a lot of ways. I mean, speaking of Zero, I remember going and seeing some of the early Zero stuff, and like, one of the problems they had was the weight, the battery, what they needed to move those. They needed so much battery because they didn't have the technology we have now, where it
Yeah.
was just heavy. And then, the motors weren't as good. So every year the batteries would get a little bit lighter, a little more powerful, but then it was almost
Yeah.
obsoleting their previous bike. So you're kind
Yeah.
of, cutting your arm off there every time you
Yeah.
come out with better technology. So
And it's a good, we kind of talked early, we want to talk maybe the state of the industry. It's a good interesting perspective that I think a lot of people don't quite get. And it might sound, sort of ironic or paradoxical coming from someone like me, but the state of the battery tech right now cannot fully replace gasoline. It is physics, and it is
right.
the reality of the energy density and how much energy you can store in a given volume. Right now, when you factor in efficiency of the system, so an electric system is much more efficient than a gas system. It's 2 to 3x more efficient than a gas
Yeah.
system.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Less wasted heat, all that stuff, right? But even factoring that in, like let's say we have this much gasoline and this much battery, the equivalent gasoline is going to be close to 20x more energy stored in the same volume. So this is where range comes from. This is where weight comes from. And so our positioning is trying to embrace that reality and say the use case for our bike is more like 1 to 2 hours of kind of the funnest riding possible. It has a swappable battery because we know that, kind of similar to like your Milwaukee or Makita, like you're going to use the
Yeah.
battery up, right?
Yeah.
You can run the weed eater. You can run the weed eater in the backyard
Well,
for
you
an
look at
hour on
like the
gas, or you can run it for,
Goguros out of
yeah,
Taiwan, where they've got those
yeah,
swappable batteries, which are pretty cool. And I've seen a few others that, so you can just pull that battery. You have a couple of battery packs that are charged up. You can swap one for the other. But most
yeah.
people aren't riding recreational stuff for more than an hour or two at a time
Yeah.
anyway. So you've
Yeah,
got time.
let's face it, we get tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Especially us old guys. You guys are
yeah.
you're in good shape. But yeah, us old guys, I'm like, okay, 30 minutes, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea, is like battery tech is getting better. Like yearly, the energy density is getting higher, the power density is getting higher. Power actually equivalence for is actually quite good, but the problem is actually energy, which is, dictates range. And so we will get there. I believe next 5 to 10 years, the battery tech is coming that we're starting to really approach like a apples to apples experience replacement. But for now, you are trading cost and weight to try to get a similar level of range. But for us, we'd rather not trade cost and weight. And so we're going to say, yeah, we're not going to give you the 4 hours of riding in 65 miles in the hills. We'll give you an hour and a half, 2 hours and 35 miles,
Your like your brand, your concept is, because it is an off-road trail recreational type thing, that yeah, the range anxiety thing is not really an issue, right? You probably have a pretty good battery. I don't know what your battery, longevity was, it a couple hours maybe, what. So I think that's the problem with a lot of the road bikes that are the electric motorcycle and e-bike road stuff, is that people get that anxiety, like, I can't go 200 miles. Well, you
yeah.
probably don't do that. You're not, you're probably filling up on gas anyway if you're even driving a car,
Yeah.
that far. So.
The challenge with a lot of, and I think there are brands that are trying to improve on this. The Energicas are like, they can use the really fast charge kind of systems,
Yeah,
and you can charge in 20 minutes or something, which helps a lot, right? Like if you
sure.
have the
As far as
availability
like
of high
turnaround.
speed, yeah, but a lot of, say the smaller form factor street bikes that are electric, you can't charge as fast, and that's part of the equation. But I think what's interesting, my perspective, is the value proposition of electric on dirt is a bit higher than on street. I think the lack of noise is a massive unlock when it comes to riding dirt, because it means tracks can come back to closer to urban environments. It means
Yeah.
trails can be ridden from home now, without disturbing
Plus the
neighbors.
lack of pollution, especially in
Lack of
like
pollution.
Oregon, where you're riding. I know that the Deschutes area, I've ridden
Yeah.
up in that area, but Oregon's got some really nice trails, but it's a lot better if you have
Yeah.
something like this to ride on it, where you're
Even fire hazard is, spark arresters in California, all that stuff. Harder and harder to get the right stickers in California. I think the value prop there is like more riding opportunities, less maintenance, and it's going to be faster, less overhead for the typical person. You know, we get busy with life, we get kids. Instead of
Yeah.
maintaining one bike and, you know, just telling your girlfriend like, hey, I'm going out for a all day ride. Now it's like trying to manage and balance the time with your kids and your spouse and the maintenance of 8 bikes instead of one bike, you know.
Yeah.
And so electric's really nice, and I think that unlocks like the ability to go recreate and have that fun time on the dirt. I think electric on street, like we said, there's some current trade-offs, and it's hard to square that circle still, where it's like whether it's range or weight, the electric experience is nice, like it's
Yeah.
smooth. It feels like,
Sure.
you know, like kind of a unique sensation of accelerating, you know, as quickly as you can on the street. But let's face it, like a 1,000 cc bike accelerates plenty fast,
Oh
right?
yeah.
and
It's hard,
and
and the sound, the whole the
it's part of the
experience of that
experience.
is
And the safety factor, like you lower the barrier of learning how to ride on a bike like ours, easier hand controls and all that stuff. You can get, like I've taught my wife in a matter of 5 minutes how to learn to ride a dirt bike, and then she's off on her own. You can't
yeah.
do that typically with a clutch enabled bike, but
No.
on the street it applies, but at the same time you still have to go duke it out with the cars.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
No,
like
I know. And
that's the
then
real barrier of entry to learning to ride for the street, you know.
right. Yeah, and then there's the whole issue, you know, then you've got to have everything DOT, street legal. So you know, I think starting out like this is for sure a bonus. And I think the off-road market is really primed for some good electric
Yeah,
vehicles because it's an ideal space for it to prove itself, you know,
yeah,
because you can have just as much fun on
that's
that
right.
as you can, you know, maybe more fun because, like you said, you're not as distracted with some of the other controls, you know.
Yeah. One of the
Um,
things sort of slightly, you know, coming a little bit external from the industry, like being around 2 and 4 wheel motorsports like my whole life, but not like being in the race industry or something like that. The outsider's perspective is the sport's gotten very serious. You know, like
yeah,
every year there's new bike launches, there's new gear launches. You got to be kitted out the right way. Like there's
just keeps
literally, you
going
know,
up and up and
in
up, you
in
know.
50 cc increments, there's a big different bike in a different class, and like everyone takes it super seriously. And I think there's an opportunity to bring just sort of the fun factor back to it. Kind of the reason everyone twists the throttle is because it's an undeniable sensation that gets you in the flow state, and it's fun. And like
Yeah.
you go back to sort of the growing up backyard track days when you're trying to like pass your friends or, you know, roost your friends or whatever, and you're just like, oh, watch this, let's pile up a board on top of some logs and send
Oh
it,
yeah.
you know. Like that's kind of what we're trying to do, is a little bit more lighthearted, fun focused. And so the lightweight, the kind of very torquey responsive experience, we say it's like 125 class e-moto, a little bit smaller, a little bit more approachable, more
But
fun
more
oriented,
torquey.
more torquey. That's right. Yeah.
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 Now, are these lighter than a gas powered bike, or is it
Our
about the
target,
same?
yeah, our target is to come in lighter than a 125 wet. So our target is to hit 200 pounds fully loaded
Oh,
with
okay.
electrons.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, power to weight
The
ratio
wet
is
weight is
similar. Yeah.
electrons, you know. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
So power to weight ratio actually ends up being kind of similar towards like a 254 stroke, but then the weight itself is quite a bit lighter. And which it doesn't seem like a lot, but like, you know, shedding 25
Oh,
pounds actually makes a big difference when it comes to like low siding and turns,
yeah.
and, you know, a little bit lower standover means also like,
There's
you know,
racing
you're,
teams that pay big money for a powered weight. You know, they
yeah,
say that power to weight, you know, you drop that, it's like buying horsepower. You
that's
know,
right.
so
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's the idea, is coming a bit lighter, still moto class reliable, you know, takes a beating, but at the same time has a unique sensation because of the torque. Yeah.
you know, and I think what's cool about electric too is, again, I've got a ton of gas powered stuff. And you know, I always said I have gas in my veins, whatever. That is changing. Like I've pretty much grown to appreciate the technology and the what electric can offer. I did do a presentation a couple years ago at Electrify Expo for a different
Mhm.
magazine in the automotive side. And, you know, I'm kind of I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm an early adopter because I don't have an electric vehicle at this point, but I would say that I'm not a hater of it, you know, and you see a lot of
Mhm.
I follow a lot of different industry coverage from automotive to power sports and everything. And I see all the haters out there on it.
Hmm.
And I just think that those guys are, they're going to be left in the dust, pardon the
Yeah.
pun, but they're going to be
Yeah.
left in the dust because, where the technology's going and the young kids that are coming in and these kids that are interested in technology and things, we can get them interested in this sport,
Yeah.
and no one should try to be putting that down, because we need to grow the sport, not kill it,
Yeah. Well, I
is
like
kind of
to
the way I see it.
that's what I like to say, that more kids can wheelie with a throttle than ever before in the history of the planet, and that's because of electric bikes.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
how do you use that excitement and energy and bring it into the sport and revitalize it and help it grow? The reality is the outdoor industry has sort of tripled over the last 20 years, and dirt biking has over the last 20 years remained flat.
Yeah.
It peaked in the early thousands and then it dipped, and now we're just starting to come out of that dip. So how do we close that gap? Why have those sports and skiing and mountain biking and water sports grown so fast and dirt biking hasn't? And I think we can answer some of that with technology, making it more approachable and more fun and accessible because of the digital nature. But to your point, like, if you're closed-minded, it goes across all of life, right? Like, you can have your preferences, and those a lot of times are hard earned, whether it's because of nostalgia, you grew up smelling race gas, or it's because you've just come to realize you like riding on the pipe, and so two-stroke is more fun for you than four-stroke. But if you're not open to trying something that could actually be fun and add fun, it's like mountain bikers that were anti-suspension. It's like, no way, full
Oh
rigid is
yeah.
the. It's like you don't know what you're missing if you're not trying suspension on a
I
mountain bike,
mean,
right?
and speaking of, you're in Bend, I grew up skiing in Mount Bachelor there, and I was skiing there before snowboarders. So we had the same thing with snowboarding. Skiers hated snowboarder. Oh, these snowboard. But guess what? We've all come to accept snowboarding is here to stay. You know what I mean?
That's
Like
right.
it's not going
Yeah.
anywhere, and everyone's learned to
Yeah.
get along. So
Yeah. And I
for the
love
most
gas
part,
bikes too. Like I fully
yeah,
ident like I said earlier, like right now in terms of the pinnacle of performance and what you can get out of, a unit of storage, the gasoline products are the best. And I think the upper end of racing, in the current formats that we see
yeah,
are going to be gas for a while. And I think that's cool. Like and I think
yeah.
we can have these bikes, our bikes, next to those bikes in the garage on the day-to-day basis. It's maybe easier to just flip the switch and go with an electric bike. But like when you want to go big, pull out the gas bike and have that
Sure.
experience too, so
I would like to see that, like somebody have one and see what gets ridden the most. And I think though, again, going back to like maintenance and like entry points here, there's a lot of people that don't have the mechanical skill that we used to have 50 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. People brought up to, wrench on their cars. Back when you had carbureted cars, everyone had to, you're rejetting, rebuilding
yeah.
your carburetor on a picnic bench with a beer and a screwdriver. You can't, no one does that anymore.
Yeah.
So these things are now become they don't leak anything. There's no fluids leaking. There's no, you take the battery out of it and you can store that somewhere, have it charged up.
Yeah.
But I mean, the maintenance stuff, it's just other than the regular consumables, tires and brakes and suspension kind of things,
Yeah.
but that's really relatively easy. I think that entry point, we need to make it. And I love this fact that we can have something like this and be an easy entry into a sport like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And then
So,
you could take it as far as you want with, kind of the other products that are on offer. And I think it's good for
yeah,
everyone to have options. And
yeah,
some people, it's okay if our bike's not for everyone, like that. We don't feel like we need to replace an entire kind of industry of, kind of gas products. But at the same time, I think we are a great option for a lot of people that want to have a different experience and try electric and get into the sport too. So.
now, what is your timeline for production? We talked a little bit earlier. You're going to have them some of your production facility out of Detroit with a third party company, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you see a timeline coming soon, or what is your plan there?
Yeah. So we currently are working to take the learnings from these alpha bikes, apply them into the next iteration of the design, or beta kind of prototypes. We're going to be working on those through the summer, and building a bunch more. So on the order of 10 to 12 beta bikes for full validation testing, and let's say larger demos, and kind of dealer and press outreach, sort of late summer, early fall. Take those learnings into the final production design, lock that the end of this year, and enter into production the beginning of next year. So we're targeting having bikes rolling out to our first customers, the Founders 50 people, in roughly the May timeframe of next year. So about a year out.
Year.
Yep.
So like Q2 next year, Q2 25, basically.
That's right. Basically 1 year out is when we expect kind of first bikes to start rolling off the line. As you mentioned, we've signed an agreement with Bloom, based out of the Detroit area, to do final assembly, fulfillment, and service. And the purpose there is, the Detroit area is, deeply experienced in building vehicles.
They know manufacturing.
They know manufacturing. A lot of skilled labor out there. It's fairly central in terms of some real core, I think, regions in terms of motorsport activity. And then it also allows us to focus on development and sales and marketing, and let folks that have experience building common kind of,
you don't have that headache then on you. You can kind of develop the bike, get it there, and then once that's fine, you can focus on the sales part and being able to sales, and they'll do kind of the serviceability and the shipping and logistics and all that kind of stuff.
And it is key. We'll be there a lot. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing in the US, is to make sure quality is there. Every bike we ship, to make sure, is going to kind of stand up to our brand and what people are expecting from us at a more premium kind of positioning. So American built, we're going to be sourcing parts globally, as every motorcycle on the planet is sourced with parts from all over the world. So we can't say made in America.
But we
can say built in America.
Let's say Chevy and Ford are, I think Toyota might have more American-made parts on them at this point.
Right.
There's been a thing. So everything's sourced from all over. It's just the quality of components, and then obviously some of the skill level and the design and all that stuff happens here in Bend, and and the support. The main thing is too the support level being what it is, because if they're way off across overseas somewhere, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And we've seen too many horror stories of that not working out. So,
well, a great example is our friends at Cobra, right? Like, they're making some of the best kids race bikes, but they're at the races, right? They understand a race weekend could be, won or lost if they're able to get a spare part or the support needed. If they're, deploying a new product, their electric kind of 50cc class bike, like, they knew being on site to support was really important. And if, the brand is based in Asia or it's based in Europe, they're not necessarily going to be there kind of at that grassroots level. And that's important to us. We know that the grassroots part of the sport is so important here in the US.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Families, this is their hobby as a family, and they're getting out to races, or they're getting out for weekends camping, and, making sure that we have common part fitment that could be serviced at a power sports shop, and, or, direct access to our team as needed, is going to be important.
Yeah, support of the grassroots level, I think, is huge, especially for this, for our industry, because that is where the bulk of it is. I mean, obviously, if your customers are all at the racetrack, you have to be there. But I mean, grassroots and having that kind of support and the service and parts availability, all that is huge, and it can be make or break. We've seen, obviously, we were talking about Caker, they didn't make it, I mean, maybe they're getting I don't know. There was a dealer in Florida that bought out their inventory, maybe with hopes of trying to resurrect something. I'm not sure, but we've seen a lot of these brand. I think Sondors is another one that they went on, they built all these things, and they're in China. Cake is out of Sweden. So it's not, and a lot of it was just, there was the automotive side of EVs went crazy with investment, right? There was so much money. And I kept saying, look, follow the money, because the money is where all the development, everything. But now all that's just completely stopped.
Yeah.
Even on the automotive, they've like yanked the plug, they're unplugging stuff. Tesla's like, screw, we're getting, but
Yeah.
the technology is still here, and there are people still buying electric, and
Yeah.
that's what they're going to be into. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time, maybe where it's
Yeah.
a little downward blip, but it's not going away,
That's
I don't
right.
think in any way.
Yeah. I think it was a hype cycle, and it's never good for any industry to be like,
Overhyped, yeah.
overheated and overhyped. And I think there are absolutely benefits to the electrified product. I think over time it will start to take more and more of the industry, especially for more typical use cases, because of
Yeah.
the efficiency and ease of use. But I also think that we should be reasonable and think that the final solution is probably a diversity of options. And what's interesting about some of those brands you mentioned, service and support and connectivity to the customer was a big piece of it. Like a lot of people I knew that had some of those bikes were left in the lurch for months because they couldn't actually get parts. And so we're okay starting a little bit slower, a little bit more pragmatic, like not promising sales of 10,000 bikes our first year, if it means that we can take better care of our first customers and build a good foundation, And I think that's what the hype cycle did for those other companies. They took many millions of dollars and they had these expectations that they had to 10x in short time frame, and that's not possible.
I feel like it's like buying social media likes or something. It's like they took up, you know what I mean? Like, you guys are building it organically. And I think that's what's really cool about this. It's really getting built organically, kind of each piece by piece. You're not trying to jump steps and buy extra, customers or likes or following or hype and all that stuff. So I think that, the more you build that solid foundation, the better off you're going to be coming out of it. So,
yeah. A lot of our stuff is organic, kind of no spend on our social and marketing, really. And
well,
it's all
right,
about
though,
connecting with people. And and I think people have enjoyed kind of that more
authentic
take. Yeah.
It's authentic. And I think that's what people right now want. So, well, hey, I really appreciate your time. I think we've covered a ton. Is there anything else you want to add here that we didn't go over that, you want to mention before we leave?
Yeah, if anything that we've talked about gets people excited, we still have our first 100 crowdfund offering open. We filled over 2/3 so far, so we don't have a ton of slots left of that 100. But we've got some fun kind of perks that are available at this point. We're going to do a custom launch edition graphics kit. And if we hit 100, we're going to do a raffle for a fully custom helmet painted for the winner. They get to design that with a painter. And so we got some fun stuff. It's a discount on the bike. It's going to be 15% off if you sign up through First 100, and you get to join us for the monthly kind of development calls. So yeah, if it sounded good to anyone, we'd love to have you on board and join us for the journey. And otherwise, please follow us on our social, dust.moto, and check our website on www.dustmoto.com.
That sounds great. And hopefully some dealers are going to be interested in contact you as well, because I think there's some opportunity for them. So
absolutely. Yeah. Hit me up, Colin at dustmoto.com. If you're interested in being a dealer, we're going to do that kind of down select, through the second half of this year, but we'd love to build the relationships and talk about what we're trying to do and find really well aligned, I think, leading dealers to go on this journey with us. So that'd be great.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, and good luck. So
thanks so much, Brendan.
If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us on powersportsbusiness.com.